With the brilliance of your wisdom, O compassionate one, illuminate the darkness enclosing my mind, enlighten my intelligence and wisdom, so that I may gain insight into the Buddha's words and the texts that explain them. So let's see here. This, by the way, is, as you probably guessed, Jigme Lingpa. What you have above are some significant masters in, you could say, the lineage of Jigme Lingpa. There's the primordial Buddha, Samantabhadra, and straight under under Samantabhadra, you have Longchenpa. And to the right of Longchenpa, you have Vimalamitra, and to the left of Longchenpa, you have Padmasambhava. So all of these were very significant in Jigme Lingpa's activity, his enlightened activity. And below you have the protectress of mantra, Ngaksoma, or Ekajati, who is particularly dedicated to the protecting of the Dzogchen teaching. Good. So verse 68 then reads, at their outset, in their middle, and in their ending, the vows are not in conflict with each other. They're relative phenomena whereby one's attitude is changed. If those who apprehend their bodies and their minds as real and hold the three vows, practicing with aspiration, remain therein and keep their different aspects, they must observe the vows combined. Now, here in the context is, again, the discussion of the 6 paramitas, which really defines the bodhicitta of application. And in the discussion of the 6 paramitas, we're in the second paramita, the paramita of discipline. And we're presently in the first, actually, there's 3 sections to it. The first concerns what we don't want to do. The second concerns what we would want to do. And then finally, there's a section on how to benefit others. But in the not what we're not supposed to be doing or don't want to do, we discuss the vows, which is really a big element in the practice of the Buddhist path, because it really constitutes the discipline, whether we are lay people or ordained people. But as we have seen earlier, we have these various levels of vows. And now we are coming to conclusion of this discussion. And of course, what we're talking about is very much how the vows, they are a support for our practice. And yet they're also something which is, you could say, relative, and their value really depends on the intention and also what they can effectuate in the mind of someone. So the vows are not an end in itself. They are means for changing or transmuting one's confused mind, freeing the confused mind. Anyway, here then, so that's where we kind of want to understand that everything that we have in terms of the 3 vows really all come down to a single logic, which is providing the framework for liberation. So Kangyur Rinpoche comments, he says, out of concern for people who successively pursue the stages of the path, the Buddha stipulated specific periods for observance of the 3 vows. First he taught that beginners should practice the precepts of pratimoksha discipline in order to banish emotional defilements and the negative actions of thought, word, and deed, which are a hindrance to liberation. Now, this is where we should identify the objective as the liberation of the individual. So it's very much the path where we take responsibility for ourselves. It sort of precedes the greater activity of the bodhisattva, but it's absolutely essential before one begins to act for the benefit of others, that there is actually somebody capable of doing that. And that is where someone who already has mastered all the confused emotional impulses and patterns and so forth. So that's where there's an emphasis on simply focusing on oneself. So that's also where, when you read Chogyam Trungpa, this is what he defines as Hinayana. Now, of course, if you read Buddhist, or rather if you read Mahayana texts, then what we understand with Hinayana usually is associated with lesser motivation and also a smaller world view, a less accurate understanding of reality. But nevertheless, there's universal agreement that this foundation needs to be in place first. So this is also associated then with the monastic vows. Then it says, then as a means to restrain selfish attitudes and the consequent actions of body, speech, and mind that obstruct the welfare of others, the Buddha set forth the precepts of the Bodhisattva discipline. So that's again where someone who has, you could say, accomplished the fundamental discipline of, you could say, having perfect clarity of mind and the qualities of mind, then so that this does not just limit it to just a single individual, then there is then the Bodhisattva discipline, which is really what we're studying here, the intention to benefit others and the actual active benefiting of others. So that's where one's body, speech, and mind is entirely hooked up to this project. And then Kangyur Rinpoche says, for those who have gained proficiency in this and whose attitudes and behavior have become truly other-centered, that's an interesting word, but it's a very valuable word, really. And that is this quality of, and we, of course, shouldn't think that it means being a busybody and minding other people's business, but it just comes from that classical Mahayana logic that says there's a lot more of the others than there is of myself. And that's why the main concern is, of course, the majority of who there are from a wider perspective, in which we're a very small little unit in the midst of an infinite universe. And so the Bodhisattva, also from the point of view, as we know, recognizing the kindness of others, having been our parents and so forth, then there's this incredible shift away from just oneself to others. And so for those who truly have gained this, because it really has become part of them, this other centering, it says here, the Buddha then expounded the tantric discipline of the Vijayasattva's as a method for halting the ordinary perceptions of the three doors of body, speech, and mind, and halting the deluded clinging to samsara that impedes the swift and effortless accomplishment of the welfare of others. So for such individuals that no longer are tangled up in, you say, self-centered neurosis, and you could say have the foundations of both the individual liberation and the Bodhisattva discipline, then the Buddha taught the discipline of insight into the subtle aspects, or you could say the pure aspects that are innate, namely then the body, speech, and mind that we ordinarily, you could say, abuse, that we ordinarily treat our innately sacred body and speech and mind, we ordinarily treat that in a way that abuses it. So we end up having this confused patterning that creates a sentient being. But innately our body, speech, and mind has never moved from its original purity. And that's the insight of the Bodhisattva on the higher level, what we then call the Vijayasattva's. And that's where then, on the basis of the yoga or the tantric discipline of engaging then body, speech, and mind as in their pure nature, which is what we do through the development stage and the perfection stage practices. Then there is a very quick way to connect with this innate purity through directly connecting with the abiding purity of our being, rather than trying to negotiate the confused constructs of the ordinary mind. So that's where we then refer to this as the Vajrayana, that which takes as its path the unchanging purity that's basic to all of us. So that's where then, on the basis of such skillful means, then there is the swift and effortless accomplishment of the welfare of others. So these three vows, it says here, the three vows are like medicines administered to a sick person at the beginning, middle, and end of an illness. They do not in any way contradict each other. They are essentially relative and interdependent phenomena, having the status of consciousness concomitant with the mental factor of intention. So that means these vows, they are so beneficial in terms of our situation, and they all work together. And also they create the auspicious conditions for us becoming well. And what they essentially have, what really defines them, what really, you could say, defines their effectiveness or their role, what we call then the interdependent phenomena, is the core of this interdependent phenomena doesn't necessarily only lie in the actions and the physical actions and the verbal actions, but it is so much dependent and contingent on the attitude, the motivation. And that's here then this, I was wondering what the Tibetan term for this is, and it's probably a very sophisticated, how do you say, piece of vocabulary. Consciousness concomitant with the mental factor of intention. And I'm sorry, I probably am guilty of missing some of the subtle, you could say, context of this particular piece of vocabulary, but I'm just reading it as it essentially just means it really just means a mind of intention, meaning positive intention. So in the intermediate term, so that's then the nature of this. And then it says in the intermediate term, their observance. So once is we take them, then we observe them. Their observance affect a transformation of attitude, which becomes increasingly refined. So that's where, as someone practices these vows, whatever they might be, monastic, bodhisattva, vijayadhara, someone practices this, it changes the attitude. And that's where it becomes increasingly refined, while on the ultimate level, it brings about a transmutation of the perceptions of the compounded mind into uncompounded wisdom. So that's where relatively this changes the individual, but also it brings about an understanding of the absolute. So this works on both levels of truth. One is on the level of the appearance, the attitude, and so on. The other is at the level of emptiness, or at the level of wisdom, where on the basis of this framework, then the changing of perceptions opens up to an insight into changing from the ordinary mind into the seeing the wisdom, or the uncompounded wisdom. So you have these two: compounded mind, which is the scope of a sentient being, and uncompounded wisdom, which is the scope of a sublime being. So verse 69. If thus they keep the vows, the lower precepts are enhanced. If downfalls are repaired, this must be done according to the level of the vow infringed, since actions that give rise to faults have been prescribed, and what produces qualities and merit is allowed. Allowance or prescription hinges not upon the letter of the law, but must be gauged according to the agent's attitude. So all of these vows, they need to be kept, they need to be maintained, as it talks about, but the qualities and what certain things need to be, the purpose of the vows is we give up some negative things, we embrace, you could say, a constructive lifestyle. But all of this, you could say, when the things that we do and the things that we don't do, it's an important point here, hinges not on the letter of the law, not upon the letter of the law. And that's where it's not about literal. So that's where, again, it's very dangerous to think of this just in terms of behavior. It's about the attitude. Anyway, so Kangyur Rinpoche will comment on this. Most people nowadays lack all proficiency in learning, reflection, and meditation. Okay, these are essentially the three components that generate wisdom, the three kinds of prajnas. Now, people like myself sadly lack in that regard. And then it says here, for them, therefore, nothing is ever transmuted into deity or amrita. And this is interesting. This is actually where there is a lack of insight in how to deal with our phenomena. But the ones, it's interesting here, it says, their own bodies, the body of a partner, or phenomena in general. This is from Dinghuchen Rinpoche. So that's where we talk about the way that we see ourselves. We fail to see ourselves as deity. And also when we have a partner, or I would also venture into saying others, when we see others, we fail to see that we are deity, others are deity. And of course, what we mean with that is that we don't have the wisdom to see through the constructs of others, of ourselves and others, and we just look at we don't see through the constructs, and we just look at the surface and get stuck on that. And that's where we fail to see the innate nature, which is deity, Buddha nature. We fail to see that. But anyway, that's where we would talk about this in terms of that lacking in this kind of wisdom, then we are not transmuting things into deity or amrita. And that's where we sometimes in the Vajrayana, we refer to seeing all phenomena as amrita. It's simply just the interaction with phenomena is life-giving. So that's where there's this you could say the present day, and I guess this is referring to the Kali Yuga, where we have very gross perceptions. It says here then, their thoughts of craving and desire remain on the ordinary level, and they regard prohibitions and permissions as real. So this is where, when you're taught, what as a monk or a nun or a bodhisattva, as a Vijayadhara, whatever, then we think, oh, this is what I'm supposed to be doing, right? Which is fair enough. But if there really was a perfect awareness, then it wouldn't be thought of as something that one needed to do. It would just arise spontaneously. So that's where there's a sense of I am conforming, or I have certain vows and commitments. They say here, they receive the three vows and undertake an aspirational practice of the training in united means and wisdom, abiding in each of the three vows separately until such time as a breach or degeneration occurs. So what we mean with united means and wisdom is that on one hand, we are setting the structures and boundaries and agendas, if you like, for body, speech, and mind. And that's the skillful means. That we are putting them on the path. We're doing things. But this facilitates insight. And that's also where, as we are practicing the path, the highest objective is the wisdom. We always need to remember that. That's what you could say cuts through the delusion of samsara. But we need the skillful means, the structure for that. And so that's where this is what one does until, of course, then sometimes this gets weakened due to one's obscurations and habits and so forth. While such people abide by the 3 vows, the specific aspect of the latter remains separate within them. So that's why we have the vows here, but also we're still thinking, I, ordinary person, am practicing these vows. So that's where you could say the vow individual remains separate. In the case of a sublime being, there's no need for vows because spontaneously, then they're inseparable from the, you could say, the intention, the awakened intention. So from the point of view of observance, they must therefore combine all the various points of the vows with regards to adoption and rejection. So that's simply knowing what one needs to do according to these various levels. Pratimoksha, Bodhisattva, and Vijaydhara. If they keep their vows in this way, their observance will be flawless. If we know what to do, if we can be monastics, yet at the same time also bodhisattvas, yet also at the same time practice the Vijaydhara vehicle. And there's particular commitments and they work beautifully together, but they also need to be understood. They're practiced. They each have their own particular set of what needs to be done and avoided. So instead of observing the lower vows merely on their own level, they will maintain them in a manner that is enhanced by and in accordance with the higher vows. So if somebody, for example, is a monastic yet has the bodhisattva intention, it's not just that they're keeping the vows with the intention that this will give them, good rebirth and possibly personal liberation, but keeping the vows is seen to be as a means for actually accomplishing ultimately the benefit of others. And if you add to that also then the Vijaydhara perspective, then it would, someone who then sees themselves in terms of their actual nature as deity would actually naturally abide by the bodhisattva vows, naturally also have no difficulty with the pratimoksha vows, and the pratimoksha and bodhisattva vows would enhance you could say, provide a solid structure and container for the Vijaydhara discipline. But, he says, if the need arises to repair a vow, this should be done separately according to the level of the vow infringed, as has been explained. In this way, the vows are perfectly restored. So this is, for example, somebody who's perhaps a practitioner of Vajrayana, but also a monastic. If they break the monastic vows, they actually need to attend to them according to whatever it might be. So I don't know, the monastics have a lot of different vows. And there are certain that actually you must abide by. But, if there's some minor vows, for example, if a monastic has a particular style of discipline, not eating after noontime, well, even if they are a Vajrayana practitioner, actually, if they then don't abide by that, then they would have to confess this in terms of their set of pratimoksha vows. So let's see here. And of course, also such individuals who are monastics, they have a very clear monastic indication of what you should do and what you shouldn't do. But at the same time, they might also be tantrikas, where it would be breaking their vows to think in terms of pure and impure. And that's where there has to be a very intelligent appreciation for how this actually works, where the one has more to do with the mind and the attitude and dualistic fixation, and the other has more to do with the behavior aspect. So that's where, for those who really understand it, it works perfectly. But then again, it's something that one needs to appreciate how these work together. When you could say the outer level appears very different. It says here, if driven by craving, one consumes alcohol, or if one teaches Dharma out of jealousy, one is acting wrongly, and such behavior is prescribed. So that's where obviously driven by alcohol, driven by craving, one then drinks. that can't be justified, even at the level of the Vijayadaras, where the drinking of alcohol should never be done on the basis of craving. Should be taken as samaya substance or as an offering of some sort. And then also, if one teaches Dharma out of jealousy, I'm going to teach here because I don't know, I'm going to teach the Dharma because I'm better than the others, or since others are already teaching and I feel jealous and hence I must, make a mark for myself or something. This behavior is prescribed. So that all again, that's where you could say the consuming of alcohol. Well, if you're hanging out with tantrikas, then it might be seen as being something that seems to be okay, but if it's driven by craving, not good. And somebody might say, oh, this person is teaching the Dharma, how good is that? But actually, if the motivation then again is jealousy, that's not so great, really. So here's an interesting comment. It says, and this is such an important point, really. Everyone should write this down to understand what do the Buddhists mean with how should you behave? What do Buddhists do? What do we mean by karma and so on? Generally speaking, this is Kangyur Rinpoche. Generally speaking, there is nothing definite about what should be cultivated and what should be prohibited. Words and deeds in themselves are neutral. Their goodness or badness derives from motive. Okay, so that's a really important thing. Actions in and of themselves, and that's particularly nowadays where we have a lot of sort of checking each other for what you're doing and saying and so on. There's so much, you could say, attention to just behavior aspect. From the Buddhist point of view, yes, there's a lot of practice of behavior, but at the end of the day, it is really what is the motivation behind that defines the action. And then we have here from our educated translator, who then says, it should be noted that, as already shown, the operative attitude is that of bodhicitta. Motive here should not be confused with moral conscience of the kind referred to in certain Western moral theories. And that, of course, is where we have a great deal of what we could call prescriptivism in Western moral theory. And you have, for example, Kant's, categorical imperative, that this is the right thing to do. No matter what happens, you must never lie. Even if you're going to give away somebody who's hiding to somebody who's going to hurt them, you must never lie. So that's sort of an absolute principle. Or other forms of just prescribing how, there are absolutes for understanding what is right and what is wrong. In the Buddhist context, this doesn't apply. It really just applies what is the individual intention. So, on the other hand, if one acts wholesomely and with good results, whatever is done for the benefit of others is permissible. So one is, the above is obviously what you don't want to be doing, but you want to keep the actions good with a good, what is it again? A clean mind and a clean body sort of thing. So that's where that is permissible, whether it be an act of generosity or something that has the appearance of a wrong deed, such as giving someone a beating. Look, if there really is a kindness behind this, and this is where sort of you could say modern day practices are quite different, but corporal punishment has not always been just seen exclusively as the actions of crazy people or aggressive people or cruel people, but it has also been seen as something that was helping, that was done out of concern for and wish to help somebody find the right way. So this is not so familiar within our culture, but it's still actually pretty prevalent within Asian cultures and also within the monastic community. And it doesn't at all constitute something that's necessarily unhealthy or driven by aggression or anger and so forth. It's really just, it can be done out of just simply wishing to guide someone, you know. Sometimes it's more compassionate than sort of very long discussions and so on. So it really just keeps it very simple, very clean. Anyway, this is potential for a rich discussion. In sum, and then now we're coming to the conclusion here. In sum, all that is said to be permissible or forbidden in accordance with the nature and aspiration of beings is not to be understood in a narrow literal sense. And this is so interesting. So this is when we talk about, you know, what do we do, what do we don't do on the path, and we have it, you could say, defined very clearly in terms of vows. It's really understanding that this has something to do with aligning oneself with you could say, the nature and aspiration, such as bodhicitta. And it shouldn't be just understood in terms of, oh yeah, you got to do this and you can't do that. So there's so much skill and intelligence in this. It must always be seen in relation to the varying attitudes of the people concerned. It is only then that the principle is properly applied. Yeah. You have this in the Christian theology where you have someone like Meister Eckhart, who would essentially very much coming from a place, if you ask me, of understanding the deity within, then also living by it and seeing that as the will of God, abiding by the will of God. And some would say, oh, that's way too strict. You can't be a human and then live by the way of God. But that's not actually what Meister Eckhart is saying. He's more just speaking about how there's a natural purity that we need to respect. So that's where there's discussions also within the Christian church. Of course, Meister Eckhart was a little bit what we call a mystic, but still very interesting to see this sort of discussion elsewhere. So we here have concluded the section within the paramita of discipline that is referred to, what is it again? It's referred to as the discipline of avoiding negative actions. Now we are coming to the discipline of gathering virtue. Okay, so stanza 17. To generate the qualities not yet possessed of all the 6 perfections and the 2 accumulations, and bringing increase to the ones already gained. All this is called the discipline of gathering virtue. It is included in the training of the mind. So Kangyur Rinpoche comments, he says, the complete and infallible means to attain enlightenment are the 6 transcendent perfections, which is the same as saying the 2 accumulations. Some of you probably would be familiar with when we take refuge and develop bodhicitta, where we say, through the merit of practicing generosity and so on. There's a line that goes like that. In those when we say generosity and so on, Chinsok in Tibetan, that actually refers to the entire Mahayana path. Because the moment that we also sometimes would refer to the Mahayana path simply as the paramita vehicle. And the entire path of the Mahayana is based on the two accumulations. Simply, and Kangyur Rinpoche will explain that here. But essentially, we would say the view of the Mahayana are the two truths, the path are the two accumulations, and the results are the two kayas. So that's where the entire, you can say, Mahayana path is understood in terms of these six perfections, and they're then summarized or understood as being the two accumulations. The practice, Kangyur Rinpoche then says, the practice of the perfections using a specific object of focus and attitude results in the accumulation of merit. And this we sometimes also refer to as tainted virtue, because there's a notion of subject, object, and an action. Let's say we give something. Then we think, oh, I am giving to so-and-so. So we have an object of focus, and we're thinking in terms of this subject, object, and action, you could say, framework. So that results, but if we do this generosity, and we still have, of course, which is natural, we're dualistic beings, but if we have that, then this accumulates merit. This is great. We offer something to something that's of great value. While the practice of the perfections in a state of non-conceptuality, in which the three spheres of subject, object, and action are seen to be without true existence, that gives rise to the accumulation of wisdom. So that's where the generosity, for example, if generosity is done without notion of self and other, and there's genuine generosity without that sort of duality, then this is where the perfections, they, with increasing force, beginning from generosity and all the way up to meditation and prajna, they then perfect the accumulation of wisdom. For really interesting discussion on the six paramitas, you have Chögyam Trungpa's Meditation in Action, which was the first book that was ever published by, I think it was the first book ever published by Shambhala Publications. But I think it was the first work of Trungpa Rinpoche that was published. But that actually goes through the paramitas. And of course, we also have a classic work like The Way of the Bodhisattva that also explains it. And of course, in works like Words of My Perfect Teacher and so on, we have discussions on the six paramitas in great detail. Just to say that the six paramitas, they loom large on the horizon. In fact, they constitute the entire horizon. So taking advantage of every favorable opportunity and skillful means, it is vital to develop the superior qualities not shared by the Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, which have not yet been generated in the mind stream. So that's where qualities here refer to the two accumulations and the practices of the paramitas, which go beyond just the scope of wishing one's own personal liberation, like the Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas. This should be done gradually, following the commitment of the Bodhisattva vow that one will train oneself step by step. All this, together with the continued cultivation of the qualities already possessed, constitutes the discipline and gathering of virtue. So that's where we commit to the bodhicitta vow, and then also we train it. We make sure that we're continually making the already existing qualities, then seeking to make them grow even more. Of the three trainings, this practice prolongs the higher training of the mind, in other words, concentration, since the one-pointed virtuous mind is in fact the essence of the six transcendent perfections of generosity and so forth. So that's when we talk about the 3 higher trainings of the mind. And I'm here thinking in terms of yeah, I'm thinking this refers to generally the 3 trainings of the mind would refer to the practice of Shila, Samadhi, and Prajna, discipline or ethics, and concentration or meditation, and then wisdom. So that's the 3 trainings. Of the 3 trainings, this practice belongs to the higher training of the mind. In other words, concentration. So we're not talking about prajna, but we are talking about then cultivating a greater bodhicitta. So that would be concentration. Since the one-pointed virtuous mind is in fact the essence of the 6 transcendent perfections of generosity and so forth. So that would refer to then this, you could say, the spirit of this being continually aimed towards the essentially being bodhicitta. But this would then be classified as concentration, which makes sense in that concentration is the place where we are directing the mind. It's not yet, you could say, wisdom, where that is freed from, you could say, the constraints of the ordinary mind. This is the ordinary mind, but imbued then with bodhicitta. Okay, 71 and 72. Virtue virtue that is filled with loving kindness and compassion. Sorry, there seems to be some trouble with the internet here. It's just, I hope it didn't interrupt for too long. It's all right? It's all good? Okay. All right, we're back on track.
No, that was very quick, very short.
Okay, good. Thanks. Thank you. It was so bizarre. All of a sudden, the whole thing disappears. Anyway, good. So here we are. So 71 and 72. Virtue that is filled with loving kindness and compassion is generosity when practiced for the sake of beings. It is discipline when free from self-concern, and patience when untiring for the sake of others. It is diligence when done with vibrant joy, and concentration when enacted with one-pointed mindfulness. It is wisdom when there is no clinging to reality of things. From virtue such as this, the 6 perfections never separate. So, that was both 71 and 72. Okay, anyway, this is great. This is a beautiful summing up of how the 6 paramitas, they work together. So then Kangyur Rinpoche then comments, says, the 6 perfections are said to be implicit in every positive action qualified by love and compassion, such as giving or the study and contemplation of the teaching. If accomplished for the sake of others, the act is one of generosity, since there is no desire to take the results for oneself. Okay, this is really interesting. So we keep in mind the bodhicitta, and particularly love and compassion. So if we think of all these actions, generosity, patience, discipline, and so on, or discipline and patience, and we think of all of them as coupled with love and driven by love and compassion. If accomplished for the sake of others, the act is one of generosity, since there is no desire to take the results for oneself. Yeah, so it means any action that we do If we have love and compassion, then they are present. Being free from self-interest, it is discipline. If performed without weariness or irritation, it is patience. If in view of the resulting qualities, it is performed with joy, it is diligence. If done intently and unwavering for the sake of others, not straying to other things, it is concentration. And if the act is performed in the manner such that the three spheres, meaning this again, this notion of I, other, and the action, subject, object, and action. If these three spheres are not apprehended as truly existent, it is wisdom. For this will mean that while interdependently produced phenomena are not overlooked, that means we're actually engaging with the world. You know, we might be, let's say we're with a taxi driver, and the taxi driver maybe can't find the way, so we feel compelled to help the guy, and we're actually genuinely sympathetic. But at the same time, we're not thinking necessarily, we're just responding to the situation. And all these, if it's driven by love and compassion, then simply just that is relating to the particular phenomena that we're situated in, and yet it is taking us out of an ordinary, you could say all the 6 paramitas are actually here. And that's where we're engaging with the world. We're helping somebody, we're active in the world, and yet at the same time, this is something that provides essentially the 2 accumulations. So, so that's why it says here, while interdependently produced phenomena are not overlooked, they are not clung to in terms of acceptance and rejection. So that's where we interact with the world, with that kind of, if there's that love and compassion, and all these, you could say the 2 levels of truth, both emptiness and appearance and wisdom, they are integrated. So that's why also this facilitates really merit and wisdom. So that's where it says here, therefore, as the 6 paramitas are all present in a single good deed, through the constant application of skillful means and wisdom, all positive actions, physical, verbal, and mental, will partake of the 6 transcendent perfections, and there will be no obstacle to the attainment of Buddhahood. Okay. It's actually a very interesting point. 73. Mindful, self-aware in all 4 activities, bodhisattvas gather perfect virtue in their every deed. Even as they walk and raise and place their feet, they effortlessly tread the path of 6 perfections, completing with great speed the 2 accumulations. So that's why we would say the bodhisattvas, once there is this, and we've read this before, once the bodhisattvas have taken the vow and committed to it and abide by the bodhisattva attitude, then anything, whatever they do, actually constitutes something that creates merit. So then it says here, moreover, even while performing the 4 morally neutral everyday activities of eating, sleeping, moving, and sitting, bodhisattvas are always in a state of mindfulness and vigilance, and being able constantly to accumulate totally pure merit by making prayers of aspiration in accordance with every deed they do, they advance effortlessly on the path of the 6 paramitas. So it's said in the Avatamsaka Sutra, we have an English translation called the Flower Ornament Scripture. It says, when bodhisattvas enter a house, they generate bodhicitta by wishing that all beings reach the city of liberation. When they lie down to rest, they wish that all beings attain the Dharmakaya. When they rise, they wish that all beings attain the Rupakaya, and so forth. So that's where every action is linked up with, you can say, virtue. This is actually where it's very helpful to spend time with sublime beings, because to see actually how there are persons who would actually live like this is very inspiring. This is true of any action they perform, even walking, merely lifting up and putting down their feet. Endowed with such skillful means, they swiftly accomplish the accumulations. It is said that the Bodhisattva vow has 4 aspects. These are mentioned in Shantideva's Shiksha Samuchaya as follows. My body and my worldly wealth, my virtues, present, past, and those to come, I will give them all to every being and protect and purify and increase them. So that's where there's these 4 aspects of giving, protecting, purifying, and increasing. Let's see here what it says. Okay, let's see. My body and my worldly wealth. Yeah. So that is what we typically cling to. I will give them all to every being and protect and purify and increase them. Okay. There's some substantial explanation, which is good. Okay, free of all self-concern. We should give beings our bodies, indeed all the aggregates, the possessions that we need for our subsistence, and all our merits of the past, present, and future. And some of you who are practicing mandala offering, you will see that this is what we offered. Body, enjoyments, and all our merit. Because we should protect what has been given for the enjoyment of beings, we must strive in conformity with the Dharma to avoid things that are hazardous for our present and future lives and that endanger the very basic for altruistic activity. So one is the giving, the other is making sure that whatever is needed for us to benefit others, meaning to remain in concordance with the Dharma. Thus the text says, protecting one's body means to stop inflicting harm. So that's where, of course, what we are making sure that the necessary conditions for benefiting others, including our body, then is you could say looked after. But at the same time, just in regard to the above, there's also no clinging to it. So that's where there is this capacity to, if needed, give one's body. Again, here it applies that, of course, this should only be done if one has the capacity. So this would be at a very, you could say, high level. Thus the text says. So with regards to wealth, the best protection is the practice of virtue and a sense of commitment with which one has. So that's where one abides by one's particular practice. Thus it says, act correctly. By training in this way, you will protect your wealth without difficulty. To dedicate the fruits of merit to enlightenment of all, instead of nourishing the improper hope of getting them for oneself, is the best way to protect one's merit. Makes sense, right? Abandon the selfish wish for results. Thus you will protect all your merits. So again, this is where we can quote Saint Francis, who says the receiving line is in the giving, and for us to consider whatever virtue we have is something that we dedicate to others, rather than thinking, oh, I've done something good now, you know, now some favor will come to this boy. Have no regret and do not talk about what you have done, but rather have a horror of wealth and renown, abandoning all pride. have faith in the Bodhisattvas and rid yourself of doubt in the Dharma. So that's where, again, we can see sometimes in sublime beings that there's no wish for any kind of wealth, there's no wish for any kind of fame, there's no sort of like, what is it, self-infatuation, thinking, oh, I'm good, or comparing oneself with others. So that's where then there's a commitment to the Bodhisattva path, and also says here, and rid yourself of doubt in the Dharma. Continually begin to, you could say, a gradual discovery, greater and greater discovery of the nature of the nature of things and the qualities of the Buddha's path. It is not enough just to protect one's body, possessions, and merit. One must purify them of all adverse factors. The body is purified by cleansing negative actions and cultivating antidotes to defiled emotion. To purify body means to cleanse away negative actions and emotions. So this is what we also do on the path, where there's, in addition to accumulation of merit, there's also the notion of purification, all the things that essentially obstruct the path to enlightenment, obscurations, and so on. To give up a wrong kind of livelihood and to cultivate virtue, in which skillful means and wisdom are conjoined, is what is meant by purification of possessions and merits. Again, this is so much about the attitude. It should be understood. Let's see if we can get it to work. Maybe. It should be understood that one's possessions are pure insofar as one's livelihood is pure. So it's the possessions that one has is not sort of things that come about from a wrong livelihood. And with wrong, we would generally refer to actions that harm others. That's the general notion. So if our work does not harm others, then we could say one's livelihood is pure. Merits are made pure by cultivating emptiness and doubt with the essence of compassion. Again, this is what we saw before. If we have love and compassion, then these 6 paramitas are present in any action. However, even though the body, possession, and merit are purified, if one fails to increase them, it will be impossible to fulfill the wishes of beings. It is necessary, therefore, to develop them further. The increase of strength and endeavor corresponds to the development of the body. The development of the body means to banish laziness and train in strength. Likewise, to give in charity in a way that unites skillful means and wisdom is to increase one's possession. So that's where it's just like this strength that comes has to be increased. So as we're practicing the path, when we say, may bodhicitta precious and sublime arise where it has not yet come to be, and where it has arisen, may it never fail, but grow and flourish ever more and more. We have that notion of having to continually increase it. To give emptiness endowed with the essence of compassion means to increase one's wealth. So to increase merit means to train oneself to act in the manner of Bodhisattva Samantabhadra. So the Bodhisattva Samantabhadra is famous for his multiplication, rather his ability to increase infinitely. For example, when we talk about an offering cloud of Samantabhadra, this refers to this samadhi of Samantabhadra, in which he was able to focus on filling the entire universe with offerings. So that was a little bit about what was it? Giving, protecting, purifying, and increasing. There you go. Okay, we'll leave it at this here. Let's see here. Let's take it to the end here. As regards the aspects emphasized in the course of training in the discipline of gathering virtue, it is said that beginners should concentrate mainly on protecting. On the level of aspirational practice, disciples apply themselves to purification. On the impure bodhisattva grounds, from the 1st to the 7th, but they should emphasize generosity, while on the pure grounds, 8th to the 10th, they should increase. They should concentrate on increasing. Okay. All right. Let's see if there's any comments. No comments. Yeah, you're good with all of this? All right, that's good. Then we'll dedicate the merit. I think I forgot to bring up the dedication. For all our births, wherever we may be born, may we be endowed with the 7 good qualities of the higher realms. As soon as we're born, may we meet with the Dharma and have the freedom to practice it properly. At that time, may we please the holy gurus and practice the Dharma throughout the day and night. Realizing the Dharma and accomplishing its essential meaning, may we cross the ocean of existence in that life. Thoroughly teaching the holy Dharma in this world, may we never tire of accomplishing the benefit of others. By this vast benefit of others, without partiality or bias, may all attain Buddhahood together. Thank you very much for joining me here. See you next week.
Thank you.